Well, good morning, everybody. This Friday, I've kind of loaded you up with a lot of content. We're going to spend some time talking about the near-term weather threats that are really hitting the West pretty hard here. Major blizzard warnings going on in the Sierra Nevada mountains where we could get 8 to 10 feet of snow. We're then going to transition to how any of this moisture could move across the rest of the country. We'll do that, and we'll also take a look at the context of it. Soil moisture, we'll talk about where February's temperature and precipitation ranks sat. And then as we work our way toward the end here, there's going to be a new discussion in the long range. We're going to look at analog years. We're going to talk about 2012 because I've been getting asked a lot of questions about 2012. And we're even going to take a good dive into what's going on in South America and the risks I see there going into March and April. So a lot ahead of us here. The map I've been talking over was released by Texas A&M Forest Service yesterday and looks at the area burned in northern parts of Texas. And so what's important about the size of this fire, which we initially saw burning from west to east, and then when the front came through from north to south, is that the total acreage that's been burned so far, according to their report, is well over 1 million acres so far this year. And what's important is to put that into context. So I pulled up some data here from the National Interagency Fire Center. So this is a .gov, and when you look at this, you can see each year in the past and the number of fires and burned acreage. So it's amazing just to say that this one fire, so far this year has already given us, approaching 40% of the same burned acres we had, a year ago. Now, when you look back at the data, for example, we stroll back to 2020 where there was 10 million acres burned, or 2017 where the numbers were that high as well. It's just an important thing to kind of assess what's going on in the central and southern plains. That's an area that I consider very vulnerable coming up this summer. I'll show you why at the very end of this presentation today, but I wanted to provide some context to those fires that were in that region. Now, I was looking also at the high-resolution rapid refresh vertically integrated smoke map. And as this restarts, I just want to show you the smoke moving through Wisconsin into Michigan, Ontario, parts of the Northeast, and Quebec today. That is actually the smoke from those wildfires earlier in the week. So we're going to continue to pay close attention to this. Our wildfire threat in the midsection of the country isn't over. We're going to get some very strong southerly winds coming off the mountains as well. A lot of dry air pushing across the midsection of the country, which we've been concerned about now for quite a while. And those winds are going to make a pretty sizable recovery in the temperature, but they are also going to increase the threat of any fire and its ability to spread. Now, the big stories for the start of the pattern going into our weekend are going to be the placement of this high-pressure cell opening up to some moisture transported to this system coming out of Texas, rolling through the Ohio River Valley. That's going to spread some decent moisture across parts of the east, including the Mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. But a lot of attention needs to be given to the storm system coming into the western United States here and what it's capable of doing in terms of adding a tremendous amount of snow to the Sierra Nevada mountains and other western mountain ranges as well. We'll take a closer look at that in a second. But first, I wanted to show you what the high temperatures were expected to be today, because I'm quite concerned about the continued dry conditions with all of the fuel we have in this area to potentially be burned if we do have more fires coming up, because such a recovery in temperatures here where, remember earlier this week, we saw these temperatures down in the teens, negative single digits in the northern plains. We've already bounced back up to highs getting, 70s as far north as South Dakota. Pretty impressive to see that. Now, we're cold in the corners, so down here in the southeast and over along the west coast of the United States. But just keeping at home here for a moment, I want to show you, this is the latest 10 centimeter or 4-inch soil moisture percentile maps from NASA. So this month of February has kind of robbed a large area here, and this actually extends into New England as well, where things have been quite dry. And it's not just the top 4 inches that I'm concerned about. We've been watching this map all winter to see if it's going to change. And as of March 1st, our 100 centimeter or 40-inch soil moisture values are still quite low throughout a big section of the Mississippi, Ohio, and Missouri basin. Take note of what's going on down here across the south as well, although we are expecting quite a bit more precipitation for the south than we are through parts of the Midwest with the upcoming systems that are going to be hitting the country. From here, let's go ahead and have a quick look at February. We'll do a full winter recap next week at some point, but to be honest, the most important part of winter is the latter half of winter as we transition into spring. And this map shows you precipitation ranks by climate district for the month of February. And again, we have some places in here in parts of Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois that just had one of their top 5 driest Februarys on record. We're also paying close attention to the Carolinas, much of the rest of the upper Midwest, and getting here into parts of New England as well. Again, that's not to ignore any other areas. I'm just trying to highlight those areas that are deepest in deficit. And given how mild February was, this has got a lot of folks just concerned about what this could mean going forward. So we're going to talk about that, because for many of us in the Midwest that are looking at some drier conditions right now, and we've known how mild it's been this winter, especially February, we see a mild forecast for March. For a lot of us in the Midwest, and this is where I'm getting these questions from, it's like, all right, the last time I felt like this, where I was out doing applications in February, we're doing a lot of that in Illinois right now, or I was thinking about planting so aggressive and early, was 2012. So I'm going to address that in a few moments. So sit tight, or just scroll to the end of the video if you want to see it. But in the meantime, we do have other things to be talking about. And we have one low that's right here as the sun was rising on the East Coast today. And that low came out of Texas yesterday. Whoops, got a new image there, sorry. There it is. And it did spread a little bit of snow. By the way, as the sun sets here, you kind of see this gray shading. That is, if I kind of rock back and forth, that is the wildfire smoke from earlier in the week getting pushed toward the Great Lakes, as you saw. Well, after some very locally heavy snow in this area, we watched that low overnight last night move out of Oklahoma into Missouri through Arkansas and starting to creep its way into Illinois. And it's now dragging in some better moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico early this morning, which is important just to see, because we need to fill in some holes down here with better moisture. But if I take you back to yesterday, it is important to just take note of where the snow was and where it is no longer. So remember, earlier in the week, we had some snow that moved through parts of the plains and Midwest, and we had some snow that was here in the Front Range of Colorado, and that is gone. And you could even see the southern edge of what's up here in North Dakota just eroding. And with the temperatures we're expecting in this area today, we're going to get rid of even more of that. So let's give you some numbers here on the season. This is season-to-date snowfall as a percent of normal through February. And as I look across the northern plains to see so much of Minnesota in the 20 to 30% range. So you've had, a fifth to a third of your total snow this year. Same thing for Wisconsin, parts of the UP. It's just a staggeringly low amount. Now, the West is going to change in a big way coming up, and you're going to see that in a few moments. But there's also been an area right in through here that's missed out, and I think it's maybe easier to see that if I go away from a percent and actually show you a departure map. So what is 20% of normal in Minnesota? Well, that means you're off by 25 to 30 inches of snow. In parts of the UP, we have some places up here that are up to 60 inches behind normal, so 5 feet behind what they should be. Same thing for the Great Lakes snowbands areas here. So despite having warm lakes, you got to have the cold air to make that lake effect snow. We've only had a few good episodes of that. So we often look at this snow as just a key indicator of what the risk might be going into spring and summer for drought, because oftentimes snowmelt in the spring is mission critical to soil moisture recovery. And so I'm worried about this area unless we get something big in March and April. And just as a reminder, if you live in the northern tier of the United States, March and April blizzards happen, and you know it. So we'll watch out for any sign that something like that could happen. Let's come out to the west now. We're going to look at the west a little differently. First, the upper Colorado Basin snowpack. We're right here on this blue line at about 93% of average. So we still need a bit more, but it's looking better than it could. And if you go out and fully into the west and look at each basin, this is where they currently sit. So the worry for me is always when we get down into this shading and below, so the 70% and below. And so while much of the Great Basin, the Sierra Nevada, parts of the Colorado Basin have seen good improvements here, we're going to watch to see if we can get some of these numbers to really begin to come up here in the northern tier of the United States. Two things to do real quick. We've done this before. Can I take you back to January 1st? That is what things look like on January 1. So we have made a pretty remarkable recovery. And if I take you back here again to the end of February, there we go, and compare this to last year, it's a big difference as well. Last year was a big snowy year. I was talking with my colleagues Matt Reardon and Andrew Pritchard the other day, and I think it is quite important to see how much cold air we can get out of the snowpack. So let me go back to 2024 real quick. There we go. And the thing to think about here is if we do build up this snowpack going forward, this tends to take the net position of the jet stream and just drop it a little bit further to the south. And why that's important is how storm systems eject out of the plains. What I'm concerned about is if we dip that jet stream to the south and it increases speed, we tend to get our dry line kind of moving out of the high desert here and moves a bit farther to the east. And that could really just change the position of where there's severe weather threat this year, but at the same time begin to increase the risk of drought in the southern and high plains. So I'm going to just toss that out there as an idea, one I'll be monitoring very, very carefully. Okay, today, the West is going to get hit hard. We've got winter storm warnings, blizzard warnings, high wind warnings, and then you get on the other side of the mountains and we've got red flag warnings that are showing up. And there's a lot of risk of wildfire coming back into this area. If you just look specifically at the Sacramento, California forecast office and what they're projecting, if you notice, this deepest shade of color here goes up to 100 inches. And there are several locations that go over that. See these white spots in here? And that would indicate where we expect snowfall totals to possibly top 10 feet. So this is an historic blizzard that's rolling through here. And snow levels are going to continue to drop throughout the next 3 days. So you can see starting off at 4,500 feet, coming down to 1,000 feet in the front range of the Sierra Nevada. But this is going to hit California pretty hard. All right, let's have a look at it from the high-res NAM. So we've got 3 systems that will now show up on this. Lead system, the big one coming into the west, which eventually goes up into the Canadian Prairie, and then the final one that comes into the west later. So playing through the middle of the day today, scattered showers and storms, not seeing a major severe weather threat here, just some places a good soaking rain that moves right into parts of the mid-Atlantic where we desperately need it. Now that goes all the way till midnight on Saturday morning. So let's take you back and watch the west. It is just persistent flow perpendicular to the mountains, which is going to load them up with snow. And you can even see the heavy snows coming into Oregon, into Idaho. And does this get out into Montana? We have to wait until we get into Saturday night. Here you go. Saturday night when that low begins to form. And now we're spreading snow through the Canadian Prairie. We're bringing it in Montana. We're even not done at this point yet with California's Sierra Nevada mountains. And that snow curling up right there is one we're going to watch for this part of Montana getting into North Dakota. You know this area is missed out on a lot of snow and it needs more moisture. Remember, we talked earlier in the week about the risk of ice. We can start to see that showing up early Sunday morning here, moving into parts of Manitoba and Ontario. But snow curling around the backside of this. Now, the west isn't done. We still have more coming around the 5th, 6th, 7th, which will translate into a 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th system through the midsection of the country. And to see that, we've got to go to the upper levels of the atmosphere. So trough ridge pattern, ridges are in red, troughs are in the cooler colors here. And as we play through, here comes the first low out, and there's that negative tilt we talked about all week, sending that low into the Canadian Prairie, keeping more mild conditions east. So that low wraps itself up here and doesn't traverse the rest of the country. We'll see that in the model comparison in a moment. But again, I said the 5th, 6th, and 7th, look at this next deep trough that's in the west. And that trough seems to be in the ensembles, one that maybe gets kind of disconnected from the really cold air and maybe cutting off here, which is going to slow the whole thing down. And just starting on the 7th, going to the 8th, 9th, and 10th of March, that's 3 to 4 days it takes to move from California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, all the way to the mid-Atlantic. And that's going to be important. How much moisture can that thing pull out of the Gulf and leave in the midsection of the country? I'm watching right here. If you're not watching with me, that's it. And we're not done yet, because on the 11th and 12th, we still see some western U.S. troughing. And even out there, 13th, 14th, 15th, the pattern isn't necessarily fully making a break away from what it's been giving us. We've washed out some of the details, but that's a full 15 days into this forecast, and I see it on repeat through the front half of this month. So what do we get out of that? Well, let's go have a look at the models. All right, we've already watched through Saturday into Sunday, so there's the low curling up into the Red River Valley of the north, spreading snow to the north of that. That system's going to leave a front. Okay, so remember this one came through and landed up here, and now it's rolling toward the Hudson Bay. It leaves a front right in through here, on which we're going to watch our next system try to build over parts of the south. So you can see in the European model, that's going to bring a good soaking rain into parts of the mid-south, the southeast, over toward the mid-Atlantic. Again, we need this big time right here in Virginia, North Carolina. Now, while all that's going on, so that's by next Wednesday, I'm going to show you the next system coming into the northwest. Here it comes in, hitting Oregon, Washington, parts of Idaho, and Montana. And then that low will come out at some point into the midsection of the country. This is the system I'm talking about that starts on the 5th, gets here by the 7th, rolls east on the 8th and 9th and 10th. Now, the models have a different show. I've been pointing at the European because it has a higher skill score right now. The GFS has been a bit different, so let's watch the GFS. The GFS has the 5th and 6th, the front making its way farther to the east, and then it has this system there. It's just a little bit farther to the south on the 8th, and if you look by the 9th and the 10th, it has something rolling across the country, increasing confidence that there is going to be a system. But there are model differences, and we should always talk about them. So let's just play this out and get an idea. Through Monday into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week, we'll park it at 1 week out. So that's your European model total accumulated precip. Pause it and have a close look. I want to show you the same time period, the GFS. So European, GFS. We could say that in places there are some similarities, but because the European, look at the, oh, just do this. Here's the differences, ready? That's the GFS. Here's the model differences out a week. European's wetter west, except for the Sierra Nevada where the GFS puts down the most snow. You can see this next system in the plains, this is the 7th, 8th, and 9th system, is wetter in the European. But the GFS really soaks Mississippi and Alabama and parts of the Ohio River Valley. But then the European is wetter in the southeast. So this is just telling you that these systems are very hard to pin down on their exact positions as to what they're going to do. And it's even harder to do this with snow. So here's the European model, next 7 days of snow. There you go. We're talking, again, places here, you saw the map earlier, are getting 5 to 10 feet of snow, heavy snow amounts in Northern California up into this part of the Cascades. Look at the Northern Rockies, like the Payette National Forest, getting over here toward Yellowstone, a ton of snow. We need more of this in the upper Colorado Basin in this area, and then the Canadian Prairie, really good opportunity to grab a lot of snow. We have some in New England, some coming out of the system right now here, but if you compare it to the GFS, but the biggest difference is the GFS has got more, another couple of feet of snow in the Sierra Nevada compared to what the European has. Probability-wise, this is just over the next 12 hours, what we're expecting. So there was a chance for a little bit of snow in here. But as we play this forward, this is going out into next week. Here we go. This is now the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. We're going to take it all the way out there to a day 10 forecast. That's the probability of an inch. Here's the chance of getting 3 inches. Here's the chance of 6. So highest probabilities outside of the mountains here. Here's the chance of 12. And as we normally do, we can just keep cranking these numbers up. There's 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet. We're going to easily eclipse that in the Sierra Nevada with this upcoming setup. If we look on the drier side of things first, as we've been doing for the last about 15 days, this is the probability of staying under 1/10 of an inch. So again, there's that dry western and high plains extending into the northern plains. That's through the first week. If I add days 7 through 10, we see that that system, this is the one that's coming out on the 8th, 9th, 10th, could deliver better moisture into this area. We've got to get a lot, but I'm not making promises. This is a huge event. And if we look at the probability of staying under 1/2 inch, that's what you've got. That's the chance of being under 1/2 inch of total precipitation in the next 10 days. So the wetter side of it's the southeast and the west. And that's the chance of 1 inch. Here's the chance of 2 inches. Notice how much this is increased here. Here's the chance of 4. So very wet down here and, of course, along the west coast. All right, week 2 forecasts. The CPC came out with a pretty aggressive, hey, we're going to stay active and stay wet. And there's good reason to think that this is the actual case with this upcoming pattern, but I want to show you the Europeans' latest solution on this. Notice it did go a little drier into California, but keeps the middle part of the country active into week 2. And again, the time frame we're looking at on these maps would be the 8th through the 14th. I also want to show you that the CPC has released its risk of heavy precipitation maps. This is the one for the 8th to the 14th. Here's the risk of heavy snow. So upper Colorado Basin, as an example. Much of the Cascades, Sierra Nevada, 8th through the 12th. And then this is the risk of high winds. So along the coast and then coming out of the central U.S. toward the Midwest. So we just need to be aware of these things that they're continuing to watch. We kind of looked at why this is the case given the activity in the upper level pattern, like we talked about a moment ago. So let's flip it over to a discussion on temperature. Next 7 days, locations in gray are expecting frost. But if we look at the temperatures, we've already seen this map. This is for today's highs. Watch as we go into Saturday. Major warm-up in the midsection of the country. Sunday, same thing. Very windy. This is out ahead of the system that's rolling way up here. Okay, cold west, hot in the central part of the country. Eastern Great Lakes, very mild. East, northeast, very mild by Tuesday. This is now when the system comes out. There it is, the 6th and the 7th. So we're going to watch that next system roll through. But still, there's a lot of mild air ahead of this next system in the midsection of the country while the west stays cold. We do see that lasts into day 10 through 15, day 5 through 10. And here's the newest day 10 through 15. So all of that is just your next 2 weeks. Now we're going to extend this out. I've made a case that the MJO, which has popped out over here north of Australia, that's where the maritime continent is. My case is that I don't think it's going to be able to sweep through 6 into 781 and make the full turn. Historically, only about 40% of these, this is based on some research that was done, forgive me, I forgot the peer-reviewed publication name, but they found that less than 40% of the times that the MJO sweeps past the maritime continent does it actually make it all the way out here through the Western Pacific. So my projections are for this to come up and around and get back into this area. And I say, well, what does that mean? That means we are going to probably keep the same dynamical setup in the flow of the atmosphere I just explained to you for a while into March. That's all we can do with that. So how do we look at this? Well, if we look at where the best rising motion is, you see it's sweeping through this area. But I actually think it's going to sweep through this area and then stall out back into phases 4, 5, and 6. And we can kind of see a reason why by looking at the trade winds. So these represent easterly wind bursts, these are westerly. And what I just take note of is that with time, okay, you can see that the best convergence is here. So it kind of starts like that and ends up just living in this area. And that's why when you look at where the best upper level motion is out there day 10 through 15, it's in phase 5, 6, right in through here. So long story short, that puts us into a kind of a wash, rinse, repeat mode, I think, with the way the whole atmosphere is set up. And the newest European weeklies take this out and bring it right back into here as well. So very few of the members are sweeping this way out into high amplitude phase 812. Now this would give us, if it does go 812, very cold air east and very warm air west. So see, I don't know that we're going to be able to make it. I think it's going to live over here. Now if that changes, because I'll watch this every day, all day long, I will tell you. But that's what I've got right now. And as a result, I think that this might pan out. This is I've shown this to you on repeat here. This was the March analogs using every year since 1950, where there was an El Nino that peaked in the winter and faded through spring. And we end up getting this as the overall pattern. Now remember, I'll say this again, when I put down these bluer colors, I only give you a 3-degree deficit in temperatures. So this is not frozen. Like this is just 3 degrees cooler than average over March. For some, that's completely imperceptible, but we're just looking at what the pattern could do. Wetter in through here, a drier stripe from parts of Texas through the Appalachian Mountains, maybe into New England, but very wet in the southeast. Maybe at the corner up here in Washington could be drier too. So is that being mimicked by the models? Well, here's the newest outlook from the European. So I see a little bit of a drier stripe there, wetter here, a little drier in northwest. So that fits pretty well with this, doesn't it? And on the temperature side of it, most of March could look like this. Now, you know that I've been worried that late March, the last week of March, we could get some cooler air in here. And the models keep hinting at it. I don't know. I'm going to point it out to you and just tell you they've trended a bit warmer. Okay, so not as cold as earlier in the week for the forecast for the same time period, but it's not a slam dunk just yet to say that it's going to get this cold in this area. Watching that like a hawk too. By the way, our analogs look just like the new CPC update. At the end of every month, they always give you a brand new forecast. This is their forecast for March. Now, here's the thing. I showed you how mild February was. And to be honest, this temperature forecast for March looks very mild as well. And overall, when we think about that, the top question I've been getting, remember I mentioned this like 25 minutes ago, is about 2012. So if you're curious, this is what March looked like in 2012. Everywhere that has the number 1 was the new warmest on record through that point in March of 2012. Cool west, very cold west, major heat in the midsection of the country. I'll never forget it. We have this thing called unofficial St. Patrick's Day right here in Champaign, and I remember having temperatures on that day that were in the 80s. Crazy start to March. Now we know what this led to. It gave us this by the time we got into mid-June to mid-August. Now I want to just make a very solid point about why 2012 has significant differences compared to 2014. I've stressed in these videos in the past that the ocean temperatures in late winter and early spring are the only metric we can really use to kind of sense what the upcoming summer could possibly be. And this is what things look like in March of 2012. Notice, no major El Nino signal like we've got right now. And if you look in the North Pacific, this is about as strong of a negative PDO signal that I can give you. Very cold water that stretches from Japan over the Aleutian Islands into the Gulf of Alaska, along the west coast, off the Baja, south of Hawaii, and all the way back over almost Indonesia. That reverse C shape is an incredibly common signature in the ocean temperatures preceding massive central U.S. drought. Okay? And this is where we currently are. So now you know why I'm so concerned about watching these ocean temperatures. If they get cold with time, then we have a wild, that's a red flag for me to worry about places here in the midsection of the country. But right now they look like this. So if this gets warmer and this gets colder, then we do have a discussion about years like 2012, and other years. But until I have that evidence, I cannot, with any good conscience, tell you that 2012 is an analog. So just be aware of that. Let's go forward with this. April. Now, I have told you many times, because this is how I feel about April, you can't forecast April ahead of schedule. We have to live through April. We now cast April. But I will stitch together those same years just to show you what the temperatures did and what the precipitation did. You're going, well, that doesn't look too bad. Well, remember, why does it look washed out and not on the ends of the color bar? That's because each of these years had an almost entirely different look to them. When you put them all together, yeah, we're a bit warmer north, a little bit cooler in the southwest, down in the southern plains. And then we were wetter from Texas all the way over to the southeast, a little bit drier in the upper Midwest. So that's what you got. Could this be a good open planting window? Sure. I think we could see better Midwest planting time period. And I'd love any moisture we can get into parts of the South and Mid-South. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm mostly worried about this happening. If we just take those same years and we say, well, what happened of all of April to October of those years? We ended up having drought risk across the South and Mid-South. Now, this is just a composite map. You know that the longer range models, which I talked about all month, they're driest here. And they're not dry here. But we know those models often have pretty poor performance in the longer range. So could this be a solution for this year? Maybe. I don't know. We'll keep analyzing it, keep looking at new things. And we just started a new month, which means we will get new long-range forecast data over the next 10 to 12 days that we'll be able to share with you. So that's what I've got for this U.S. North American view of things. South America. This is how things look in the last 2 months based off the CHIRPS data set. And you notice that parts of Mato Grosso, the southern parts of Mato Grosso, and then Mato Grosso do Sul, there's some pretty dry areas in through here over the last 2 months. Now, just so you see this, I wanted to show you what looks like in terms of ag in that area. So we're kind of zooming in on this region. Now, some of the biggest ag producing areas are up north here. Okay, but if you come down here to Campo Verde, there's a lot of fields in this area, but I want you to see that the farther west you go, the less there kind of is in terms of big, persistent everywhere fields of soybeans and corn. And then let me zoom back out, and I want to take you south of there into Mato Grosso do Sul. So that drier area stretched right in through here. Now, if you go east and west of that line, you see that west there's not a lot of ag, but east there is. So we're just trying to assess how much of this was hit. What I do know is that over the next 10 days, we're still a little bit on the drier side here while we're wetter in the northeast and wetter in northern Brazil along the northern Argentina along the Paraná River into Paraguay and Uruguay. drier into Buenos Aires. In the new long-range forecast, this is a 45-day outlook from the ECMWF, just keeps pouring in that drier air into April, and that is going to be top concern. Watch this. This is important for the corn crop that just got planted in Mato Grosso, which I'm assuming that they're now well past 90-95% planted in that area. Keep an eye on that with me. Okay, you did it. You made it through Friday with me. Have a good weekend. We'll talk again on Monday. Thanks.